A recent piece from The Atlantic reads in big, bold print, "Afghanistan is your fault. The American public now has what it wanted." Our next guest, a 13-year Marine officer, an Afghanistan and Iraq veteran, Lucas Kunce, responded to that headline saying, quote, "For decades, elites told America we were winning this war. Later, they told us while Iraq was wrong, Afghanistan was the war worth fighting. All lies." And when the Taliban took over the city of Kabul, he said today was inevitable, and anyone who tells you different is lying or would have kept us there forever. National security expert and Missouri Senate candidate Lucas Kunce is here now to share his perspective. Lucas, thanks for being here and joining us.
Tell me, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. So tell us your perspective. Elaborate on what you tweeted. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, this is like the definition of insanity, right? They told us forever that Afghanistan was going great, and then now they're blaming the voter for supposedly it being their fault. I joined the Marine Corps in 2007 during the height of the surge in Iraq, and I thought the same thing, right? And then I went to Iraq, and I led a police training team there. I'll just give you the Iraq example. And so our job was to train the Iraqi forces. And I got this PowerPoint deck of like 25 slides. We call them stoplight charts that rated our partner force, green, yellow, red on if they were good, mediocre, or bad. And these guys were all rated green and yellow. And in about 2 weeks, I was like, that's completely wrong. They should be red on most of these. And we were told from higher that we weren't allowed to rate people lower than they were and that we had to show improvement whenever we submitted the ratings. And so, there was just this huge systematic lie or systematic institutional dishonesty that was perpetuated by the people in charge. And in Iraq, we saw them get overrun by a couple thousand guys with pickup trucks, and now we're seeing the same thing in Afghanistan, right? And so it's just this big institutional lie that the people who have power or in control are happy to perpetuate because it serves their purposes.
And Lucas, when I saw that Atlantic article and I saw the headline, I thought, wow, this is actually bold of the Atlantic, because I assumed the Atlantic was talking to its readers who are kind of the elite around the world, and that would be a fair thing to say to the elite. This was your fault. But it turned out no, that's not what they meant in that article or in that headline. I'm curious, in Afghanistan, aside from Iraq, what was the moment that you realized everything there was a lie?
Sure. So a little bit on my background. I am a foreign affairs officer. I learned Pashto at Marine Special Operations Command, and then I deployed on 2 special operations task forces to Afghanistan, winter 2012-13, and then again in 2014. And I think it was when so I oversaw like 6,000 Afghan local police in Western Afghanistan, and I've never seen a more paper tiger force. They didn't win a battle. No one won a battle if we didn't fight it for them. For the 2015 fighting season, the job of the Afghans, this was after 13 years, mind you, was just to supply themselves with the basic essentials, food and ammunition. They couldn't do it, and it became my job to make sure that they got the goods from Kabul to Helmand. At that point, I thought, if they don't have this after 13 years, they're never going to have it. They just didn't have the motivation. And I think, or the capabilities. And I mean, it was really the Afghan National Security Forces, they were just a jobs program. And the people who joined up needed money. They wanted money so that they could survive. And they weren't warriors. They didn't have a good feel for the mission. And I think that the moment where I really knew that this was never going to go anywhere was when I was interviewing Taliban prisoners in the Herat City Penitentiary. And just the motivation, the clear objectives, the calm, firm demeanor that they had just showed their resolve compared to the people that we were propping up.
Lucas, I'm really worried about the morale of all of the people who have served in Afghanistan, like yourself, now seeing what has happened. Can you talk a little bit about what you're hearing from those you served with and how they're doing with all of this?
Yeah, I've been talking to a lot of my friends about it, and really the best case scenario and what I'm feeling, what I think a lot of people are feeling, is just a grim acceptance of the fact that we should have left a long time ago. That what happened was sad. We were doing what our country asked us to do. We served honorably. We did everything that we could. It was an unwinnable mission. And we should be grateful that we're finally gone and that our children don't have to go through this. Because some people who were there in 2001 or 2002, their kids got to go back. And that's really sad. It's really sad to have a forever war like that. And, for me, it's grim acceptance that this has finally happened. It should have happened about 19 years ago, and glad that my kids won't have to do the same thing.
There's been a lot of kind of Monday morning quarterbacking. Actually, literally on Monday morning, the quarterbacking was happening, saying that while people supported the withdrawal, the way that it unfolded was incompetent, etc. But I'm curious for your take. Was there actually a way to do this significantly better?
I think if we'd figured that out over 20 years, we probably would have done it. Yes, absolutely, actually. Let me back up. There was a way to do it better, and that was to leave in 2002, or to leave in 2003, or to leave in 2004, before we sunk $2.25 trillion, 20 years, and 2,500 lives into that place. The Taliban was weaker in 2002, 2003, 2004 than they are right now. If you want to get good at something, what's the best way to practice? It's to go practice against the best. You want to be a good basketball player? Play with the best. You want to be a good chess player? Play with the best, right? Well, the Taliban spent the last 20 years playing with the best military in the entire world, and they know what they're doing now. They are honed, and we would have been way better off if we just left in 2002 or 2003 and then monitored the place for counterterror activities.
So, Lucas, I have to ask you, because you are a Democrat running for Senate in Missouri,
Yep.
and there has been a lot of criticism of President Biden over the last few days from Republicans and Democrats alike. So boiling down a bit more to Ryan's question, the actual last week that we've seen of withdrawal, could it have been done better? And I ask that, you make a great point that the Taliban is actually stronger than ever in terms of their skill, but we also left high-tech weaponry for them to use, inevitably against us or our allies in the future. Do you have any criticisms of how Joe Biden handled this?
Well, first of all, if we're not there, I don't think they're going to be using it against us. So that's a great reason for us to stay out. We can always Monday quarterback, whatever you want to call it, the situation. But the fact is that what people are doing right now is they're trafficking in tragedy porn. This is stuff that gets clicks, it gets people excited, and it distracts everyone from the 2 decades of dishonesty that we just lived through, where everything was going fine, everything was rosy, the Afghans would eventually be able to take over for themselves. And the real tragedy isn't actually what we're seeing right now in the last 72 hours, the last 7 days. The real tragedy is the 20 years, the $2.25 trillion, and just everything we put in. And then it's for the women and children who are going to have to live in Afghanistan over the next 5 to 10 to however many years. And, by then, these pundits, they're not going to care about Afghanistan anymore. They're not going to talk about it. They're not going to pay any attention to it. And that's when it really needs to be happening. And that's where, the tools of our statecraft that we don't use could really make a difference, right? The military's job should not be to build up these other countries. It's expensive and it doesn't work. We've proven that. We need to use the other tools of statecraft. And I'm really worried that all these pundits and all these, people who are running the system, they're paying attention right now in Monday morning quarterbacking, but they're not going to be paying attention when we can actually try to change the situation in Afghanistan politically over the next decade or so.
Well, it's a very fair point. And the one thing I would be remiss if I didn't mention is the Afghans did lose about 20-fold the number of soldiers that the U.S. did over the last 20 years. It's very much a tragedy for their people. But to your point, should we have been there as long as we were? I think that's a very valid question. Lucas, thank you. Oh, go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I wanted to get Lucas's reaction to that, too. In order to stave off this collapse over the last weekend, the U.S. would have had to continue to prop up this fiction of an Afghan national security force, Afghan national army. And I'm curious, from what you saw and from what you understand on the ground, what was the price that the everyday Afghans who enlisted into that service just basically for the paycheck, for the jobs program, what was the price they paid on the battlefield to be put up against the Taliban without actually having successfully trained up into kind of real soldiers?
I mean, the success was actually their difficulties were more concrete than that. A lot of them weren't getting food, they weren't getting ammunition, they felt like they were alone. They were very vulnerable to what the Taliban did. I mean, the Taliban didn't schwack a lot of people when they just rolled through the country, right? That stuff was done diplomatically, it was done through relationship building, it was done through coercion and through purchasing power. And so, they just didn't have the tools to do a craft that they weren't equipped for to even begin with, or didn't care about, and so, or weren't interested in. And so, I mean, they never had a chance, basically. And it's really tough to say it any other way.
Well, Lucas, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'd love to come back sometime.
You got it, for sure.
Thanks, Lucas.
And we'll have more Rising for you right after this.